our working day, and I invite to the floor head of the Press Department, Information Department of the Ministry of Defense, Lieutenant Colonel Oksana Horiluk, and then we'll hear from Anton Mironovich on Skype, who is an ATO spokesman. Good morning, everybody. The officials of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine continues to go to garrisons to solve problems in situ. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Lieutenant General Stepan Poltorak, after visiting the International Center of Peacekeeping and Security in Lviv region, came to Transcarpathia. He visited the regional military commissariat, where he met heads of local state administrations and talked about problem issues and results of the previous waves of mobilizations. The Minister of Defense has decided to create military commissariats in every district of the region to raise the level of efficiency and fulfillment of tasks. Stepan Poltorak has stressed that the solution of social issues of military personnel and their families should become a priority task. The military commissariats have to provide all the necessary help in documentation so that the participants in the anti-terrorist operation and their families get all the social guarantees provided for by the law. Also in Uzhhorod, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine has announced the creation of the electronic database of conscripts. The money has been already channeled for this issue, and we are awaiting the signing of the relevant law. During his meeting with wives and mothers of fighters who died during the anti-terrorist operation in Donetsk and Luhansk regions, Stepan Poltorak said that very soon the Minister of Defense will address the government with the initiative to return the cancelled benefits for the members of the families of those who died in combat action. He also visited the military hospital in Mukachevo. He acquainted himself with the material basis of this medical institution and said that potential opportunities of the hospital will be increased. This working week in the Ministry of Defense will start with today's meeting of the officials of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine with the delegation of the U.S. Congress headed by the member of the House of Representatives, Peter Roskem. Also, the officials of the Ministry of Defense will take part in the ceremony of awarding to the Minister of Defense representatives of the Ministry of Defense and Armed Forces of Ukraine with medals and other awards of the French Republic. Also, we expect the signing of 14 contracts with suppliers of kitchen utensils and equipment for the Armed Forces of Ukraine to the general amount of 5,260,000 hryvnia. As of the beginning of the year until the 22nd of June, 49 additional contracts and 291 contracts for delivery and supply were signed to the general amount of almost 1.5 billion hryvnia, which is 25% higher than the entire financial resource of the procurement of utensils and materials in 2014. Also, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine continues to work on the improvement on psychological rehabilitation of the participants of anti-terrorist operation, in particular a group of military servicemen who are being treated in the Pushcha-Voditsa sanatorium with the help of volunteers, public and professional organizations, visited the recreation complex in Holosivsky Park of Kiev, and such events are being staged regularly They used art therapy, equestrian sports, and excursions at historical places. Also, in the zone of the anti-terrorist operation, the officers of the groups of civil military cooperation of the armed forces of Ukraine continue to help people, in particular in this village of Berdyansk next to Mariupol. The group of military and civil cooperation took under their auspices the 11-year-old disabled girl. During the visit to the settlement of Orlovska, together with one of charity foundations, they have handed over humanitarian help. And also they visited the Center of Children's Rehabilitation, Republic Pilgrim. And now the 3-week recreation to children's camps, the officers of the groups of civil and military cooperation have delivered 800 children. And now I give the floor to the officer of the press center of the headquarters of anti-terrorist operation, Major Anton Mironovich. The situation in the anti-terrorist operation zone remains complicated and still holds the threat of the renewal of active combat actions on the part of pro-Russian illegal armed formations in some directions. The enemy continues to increase their groupings, the number of their groupings. They continue to rotate their personnel in some units and covertly remove their military machinery closer to the demarcation line. The epicenter of the tension are the settlements that are situated next to the temporarily occupied Donetsk. Marinka, Piski, Opitna, Krasnogorivka, Avdiivka, Butovka mine are constantly under the fire of the band artillery that shells them from the territories controlled by the militants. Over the last 4 days, the pro-Russian hybrid bandit formations have 360 times shelled the positions of the Ukrainian military and the infrastructure of settlements. The most cases of the violation of ceasefire was when our entire state was marking the day of Constitution of Ukraine. That day, the militants have 101 times staged armed provocations. In particular, they have shelled Nizhny in Luhansk region from Grad, multiple launch missiles. The mercenaries of the Kremlin most often use mortars, in particular those that are banned by the Minsk agreements, caliber 120 millimeters. Also, recently they have increased the use of tanks that practically every day shell our positions and peaceful cities. Also, on the approaches to Mariupol, the militants are constantly shelling the Ukrainian positions from cannons of 122 and 152 millimeter caliber. They have twice went into combat clashes with the anti-terrorist operation forces. 2 groups composed of 4 and 35 gunmen next to Krymske and Novotoshkivske respectively have been engaged in combat with the Ukrainian military. They used small firearms, grenade launchers, anti-tank rocket missile complexes. In both cases, the attempts to break through our positions were repelled and the enemy retreated, having sustained losses. More often, yesterday, having shelled and fired at the OSCE mission in the vicinity of Mariupol from mortars, the invaders tried to shift the responsibility for this crime on our fighters. However, we have rejected this allegation in time because the armaments that are used by the anti-terrorist operation forces have next to the demarcation line has no capacity to inflict blows at the distance that was there. Besides, ever more oftenly, the Russian and separatist mass propaganda media that are being considered mass media in Russia try to discredit the forces of the anti-terrorist operation. These days, several information resources have carried the information about the Ukrainian army allegedly leaving Mariupol. Of course, this information does not fit the reality at all. However, the pretext for this information provocation was the event with the shelling of the watch point of the Joint Center on Control and Coordination of the ceasefire, as a result of which the monitors were made to change their location place. We address the media representatives with a request to carefully check any information that concerns the holding of the anti-terrorist operation and emanates from dubious sources. There were no significant changes in the structure of illegal armed formations and the Russian troops that are perpetrating crimes on the temporarily occupied territories of the east of Ukraine over this period. The enemy units are constantly maneuvering along the line of demarcation, and ammunition for the needs of the militants and the regular Russian army continue to be delivered from the territory of Russian Federation, and also they train their bandit formations in combat. However, we do not think that there is a reason to panic. The necessary measures to strengthen the combat capacity and defense capacity